Welcome back, everyone. I am excited to be with you, though a little bit sad because this is our last week together. We are in week 8 of the poetry of Emily Dickinson. Today, we're going to do things a little bit different. Instead of talking directly about Dickinson's poetry, we're actually going to spend most of our time together in this lecture talking about how you can continue your own study of Dickinson moving forward. So, we've been having conversations whether virtually in the comments or if you joined in the Zoom class in the live Zoom classes. And the conversation continues. In fact, what scholars of literature do is have conversations with each other. That might be an in person conversation at a conference. It might be through writing articles that engage the thoughts of other scholars on a particular topic. So below in the link to the link to read along with the Dickinson course, there will be a PDF that has some suggestions for further reading. I'm going to go through some of those just briefly right now and give you a few tips for engaging this new type of conversation about Emily Dickinson, the scholarly conversation. So over our past 8 weeks together, we've looked at the intersection of religion, gender, politics, science, and a variety of other things in Dickinson's work, in addition to the themes that we've explored in each of these lectures. And as I said, that's exactly what scholars do. So if there's a specific topic in these lectures that's been of interest to you, you can bet that there are scholars who are talking about that in books, in articles, and there's a good chance that those scholars have also informed my own teaching of these texts and topics over the past few weeks. All right, so I'm going to share the PowerPoint for today, and we can jump into the conversation about Emily Dickinson. So today's guiding questions: what open source resources are available to continue our study of Dickinson? I'm going to provide you with that PDF that has links, talk a little bit about a couple of them now, and then also talk about some resources that you do need to have access to a library, or you'll need to purchase the books, but they're all really helpful starting places for continuing to think about Dickinson. And then finally, how can we apply the skills and strategies we've learned in this course to continue to engage with Dickinson's poetry? If you are in the live version of this course on Zoom, you had the opportunity to choose a poem and give a brief presentation of your reading of that poem, like we've been practicing over these past weeks. If you would like to do that in the comments, feel free to choose a poem, maybe one that we didn't get to talk about, that you read for these past 8 weeks, and tell us why you like it, what stands out to you, what ways that you've learned to read over the past 8 weeks can apply to that. Maybe you want to scan the poem for meter or think about religion or nature in the context of that poem. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so please feel free to do that. Okay, so one great thing about Dickinson scholarship is that many scholars of Dickinson are committed to sharing their work in open access ways. That means you don't have to be part of a university or pay to have access to this research and these conversations. This screenshot of a website that I have right here is the Dickinson Electronic Archives 2. There are actually two versions of this, which is also linked in that handout that I mentioned. This has a variety of articles by Dickinson scholars that you can see by clicking exhibitions that I've circled there. There's one example here that they were advertising on the front page when I accessed this website a couple of weeks ago, talking about the ghosts of Emily Dickinson hauntings in popular culture. And you can see some images there that give you a sense of what might go on. We have Taylor Swift, we have images, screen grabs from the Dickinson Apple TV show. So these scholars are engaging Dickinson in contemporary culture, which is always fun and interesting to see. So have a look at that if you're interested in what other scholars are saying. It's really user-friendly. A lot of times there's multimedia elements to the exhibitions that scholars put together. If you're more of a hard copy person, I do have a few recommendations for books to get you started in reading how other scholars besides me talk about Dickinson. These are linked on the handout. The publication information is there. I'll just say that the Cambridge Companion to Emily Dickinson, which is second from the left on this PowerPoint slide, is available on Internet Archive for free. So you can make an online account for that library and get access to it. The others of these you'd need to purchase or have a friend who has them. But The Poetry of Emily Dickinson by Victoria N. Morgan is an especially useful place to start. Dr. Morgan has read all of the scholarship about Emily Dickinson from the very beginning, from the early editions that we talked about in our week on print, all the way up until now, and summarized it. It's organized thematically. So if there's a particular topic of interest to you, you can go to this book, find out what scholars you might be interested in reading, and Morgan will have information for you. The other three are collections of scholarly essays by a variety of different Dickinson scholars. As you'll see on the handout, these have been published in the past 20 or so years. And so you can kind of track the different ways that scholars have talked about Dickinson over those couple of decades. So have a look at those if you're interested. And the handout has more information. But the tricky thing about scholarly texts, and the thing that I think can make people a little hesitant to engage with scholarship, is that scholars often use specialized language that can be hard to parse if you're not familiar with it. But actually, a lot of the skills that we've been developing in this course extend from reading poetry to reading scholarly texts. You can use context clues. You can use these close reading strategies that we've been practicing to understand maybe what a term means in the context of a scholarly article. Another way to approach scholarly articles that's really helpful and is something that I use even when I approach scholarly texts is to break them down into three pieces. So any scholarly argument, really any argument in general, is going to have three pieces. There's going to be an observation, an intervention, and an implication. So here's what I mean by that. Scholars will usually observe something about the current scholarly conversation. Then they'll make an intervention, which means making their own argument, inserting their own argument into that conversation that has an implication. So what? Why does this argument matter? What does it help us better understand about Dickinson herself, her poetry, the 19th century, right? So these three parts are things that you can look for. They're not always going to be explicitly spelled out, but if you have these three elements, observation, who or what is the scholar talking about or to? The intervention, what's the central claim or set of claims? And what kind of evidence are they using, right? And then implication. So what? Why does this matter? The evidence used in the intervention can often help us understand what the implication is. So if a scholar is using a lot of biographical information about Dickinson, probably they're trying to help us better understand her as a person, and that's the implication. So we've actually been constructing these sorts of arguments in our classes when we've been moving beyond surface level reading, our first impressions of a poem, to deeper analysis that helps us better understand Dickinson as a whole and that we can apply to other poems in her body of work. We observe, then we dive in deeper to form an intervention, a specific argument about how we think Dickinson's poem ought to be read or one way to read it. And then that helps us better understand similar poems, unlock new ways of interpreting her work, maybe finding a new theme to question or think about. And as I said at the beginning of this lecture, the skills that you've been practicing in reading poetry can help you dive deeper into the scholarly conversation about Dickinson even after this lecture wraps up. And in fact, these ways of reading extend beyond poetry, beyond literature, beyond scholarly arguments to help you be a more critical and analytical reader in your daily life, no matter what you're reading. So I want to end with a poem that in our live Zoom class, a student brought up during our last day, during those presentations that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So this is poem 1212 in the complete poems of Emily Dickinson, edited by Thomas Johnson, that we've been using. And I'll read it for you. A word is dead when it is said, some say. I say it just begins to live that day. So I hope that what you've taken away from this course is what Dickinson is saying in this poem. When a word is said, it's not dead. Instead, it's alive with meaning that can enrich our lives and our conversations. And that's really what studying poetry is all about, is thinking about how these words are alive and shifting and changing as we read them. So keep that in mind as you continue your own study of Emily Dickinson poetry or literature in general. And I hope that we are able to read literature again together sometime. It's been a pleasure to have you joining either in the Zoom class or through these YouTube lectures. And as I said at the beginning, if there's a poem that we haven't talked about that really stands out to you in Emily Dickinson's body of work, feel free to put that in the comments and we can keep the conversation going. All right. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you again sometime.